Thank you for joining us. I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, whose land we're on today, and recognise any leaders past, present and future who may be here today. Thanks for coming along. I'm Craig Reucassel. I'll be your host today. I'm joined by Deanna D'Alessandro, who's the chemist in the faculties of the Engineering and Science, and also the director of the Net Zero Institute. I must admit, I've never done a function before where your degrees are put up behind you as well. It's quite interesting. Hey, hang on a second. I got first class honours as well. Where's mine? I didn't get the medal though, so Deanna, you win.
I think they've copied and pasted that from the website.
Yeah.
That might be why.
Yeah. If anyone's wondering, don't do the maths on my degrees. It did take many years. But anyway, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for coming out. And this is going to be an exciting session as well, by the way. There are Nerf guns over there that will be involved in this session. Gee, the kids got excited there, yes. We'll be teaching science through the medium of Nerf guns later on, which is fantastic. But we're here to talk about the Net Zero Institute and to look at some of the things you're doing. Deanna, let's start with, what is the Net Zero Institute? What's its aim? What's its goals?
Yeah, so the Institute is really based around the need to accelerate the work we're doing toward a more sustainable future for our planet and our people. And it also comes from the fact that as scientists and engineers, I think, we're in a really powerful position because I think we can save the world. But the reality is that science and engineering can't do it alone. And so because we're a comprehensive university, we have 8 incredible faculties here, all the way from science and engineering to social sciences and arts and this incredible Conservatorium of Music. And actually all of those 8 faculties are involved in the Net Zero Institute. And so it's really because of that incredibly diverse group of voices that we have at the table that actually we're working on solutions that we think are much more resilient and much more robust and hopefully will lead us to much more effective solutions.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't do science university, and I think for quite a while I thought, well, I'm not really part of the debate about the solutions for climate change and that kind of thing. But then when I was doing programs like War and Waste and Fight for Planet A, I realised that so often we do this research and we go, oh, okay, the scientists have already kind of solved this. The scientists and the engineers have found the problem, have found the solution. The problem is actually with the economics and the law degrees and the society, and it's that kind of stuff, and it's the social license and it's getting it into play that's actually the problem. So it does take... you actually kind of need all those different people from different backgrounds to get this to work, don't you? Like, if a scientist or an engineer invents the solution, that is the first step here, isn't it?
It might not actually be the first step. In fact, it might be that there was a social challenge that, in fact, was step 1, and then maybe there's the technical challenge that can be solved, but then more often than not, in fact, things can't really go anywhere if we don't address many of the other elements, the policy challenges, the legislative challenges. Sometimes it's the social licence challenges. It's actually the people on the ground for whom the solar farm is right on their doorstep, for whom actually working with that community is the critical step in the way of the renewable energy zone actually taking shape for the particular community. So it can be a whole range, a whole host of challenges that are presented to us.
Absolutely. Now, with the Net Zero Institute, is it just people within the university, or are you working with government, with industry? How does it work?
Yeah, so within the university, as I mentioned, we're a comprehensive university, so we have all of the faculties of the university involved, but we're very externally facing. So we have an industry board and we have an international scientific board. So just last week, we've actually been in Indonesia and in the Philippines with a couple of our board members of the Asian Development Bank, who are very important contributors to the Net Zero Institute. So we're getting input from all of those different places, and ultimately this is a challenge that can't be solved in Sydney, Australia. It certainly cannot be solved at the University of Sydney and can't be solved by me or by any one of our colleagues. This is the mission where it's the collective action, and that is the only way that we're going to be able to address the enormity of the challenge.
Yes, it is an enormous challenge. What are some of the kind of main issues and problems you're focusing on at Sydney University through the Net Zero Institute?
Yeah, so we have a whole, around about 200 colleagues now involved in the Institute across all the faculties. We have about 20 different projects that we're working on. First and foremost, the imperative of reducing demand for unsustainable resources. So we're working, for example, and you'll hear a little bit later, our amazing colleague Alejandro, who works on circular economy of critical minerals, for example. So, all the mobile phones, I'm sure almost probably every person in this audience is sitting there with a mobile phone at the moment. There's an incredible complexity. Of course, I'm a chemist, so first and foremost, what is amazing to me is that 2/3 of the periodic table is contained in that device that's in your hand. So this is an incredible, technology has provided us with all of these amazing opportunities. But the challenge is, how are we going to do this transition to a cleaner energy future when these technologies and these solutions actually require many more resources than our traditional technologies? So take, for example, an electric car. It's about 6 times as critical mineral intensive as a traditional petrol-powered car. A wind farm, about 9 times as critical mineral intensive as a traditional gas-fired power station. So you can see the enormity of the problem. They're much more, these technologies and solutions are so much needed, but they are more involved, they are more complex. So that's the reducing demand, if you like. Then there's this shift to zero emissions energy in industry. So we're going to hear shortly from my amazing colleague Anita, who works in renewable energy, particularly solar energy. So reducing the emissions, or ultimately moving to zero emissions. And then the other area we work on is something that's not really talked about a lot. So we hear a lot about nature-based solutions for climate change. So this is planting more trees, or looking at how we might use our oceans better to absorb carbon dioxide. But the reality is that all of the modelling is showing us it's not going to be enough. And so we also work on solutions. These are called engineered solutions, and one of my own areas is actually an area called direct air capture, which means that we're actually separating greenhouse gases and removing them from the atmosphere. So we're really working on a portfolio of options, and as much as I wish there was a silver bullet and there was something that would solve all of this for us, the reality is it's going to take a combination of approaches. And there are many different pathways. And the reason that we're working not just across Australia, but with many other people across the world, is that it is context specific. So for different countries around the world, there are different combinations of solutions. And I guess it's just getting practical about the fact that there will be different pathways that different geographical regions in Australia and around the world will need to use.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating how different, it's totally different approaches depending on what your natural resources are, what you have there. It's interesting talking about the complexity of this at the moment. I think the Climate Change Authority came out last week with its latest update. Our emissions are falling by a small amount, but nowhere near as much as we need them to be falling. And they're falling only in really 2 sectors, that's renewable energy and land-based capture. So in all those other areas, so many other areas like industry, waste, transport, all these areas, we are still increasing our emissions. So we need to be looking at, as you say, every little aspect. There's no silver bullet. When people go, what's the one thing I can do? It's like, there are so many things we need to be doing in this area. So, and look, as you say, I'm going to show a bit of a video here, looking at it from a net zero perspective, and it's about a balancing act. There's often areas at the moment that we don't have the technology at the moment to be zero carbon at the moment. So it's about looking at it overall. It's about looking at the manufacture of products. It's about looking at their use stage. It's looking at their end of life, for instance. So, for instance, a few years ago, we were doing a climate change documentary. And one of the questions that kept getting asked of us at the time, this is a few years ago, was, well, there's no point having electric vehicles because in Australia you charge them and you're just charging them off coal-fired power stations, so they're actually worse. What's the difference? I either put petrol in or I put coal in my EV. So we wanted to look at that particular issue. So we decided to do it through the medium of drag racing cars, naturally. But I'll talk you through why we did it afterwards and what we wanted to look at it, and also what we didn't touch on, which leads to our next speaker as well. So this is, I'm the one with the button. Here it is. I've picked the fastest and most powerful production car ever made in Australia.
the Holden HSV GTS RW1. And I'm putting it up against the newest generation of electric vehicles, the Tesla Model S. Neither of them are cheap, but I know what you really want to know. Which one is fastest? I've got to say I'm pretty nervous. I'm not used to driving a car like this, and I've never drag raced. I also have a crowd of people ready to laugh at me if I lose this thing. Time to put the Tesla and my limited driving abilities to the test.
Oh my God. Woo! That thing is mad. That's crazy. That is crazy.
It's fast.
Oh man, just the launch is unbelievable.
Yeah, the launch is nuts. I still don't have my heart back.
I was watching it go and it just bang, bang, gone. I tell you what, that is unbelievable. Man, if this is the future, we're gonna have some fun. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun. All I've got to do is have some wheels and some spoilers and some sexy. Yeah. I'll be perfect.
Exactly.
So we know that a Tesla can outrun the most powerful car in Australia, but how does it stack up environmentally? This one doesn't pump anything out of its tailpipe. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it has a tailpipe. But if it charges off the grid, this is the difference. And if you charge this off renewable energy, then it's more like this.
So yes, this is what we were trying to do. We were trying to show people that yes, if you're charging off the grid, an EV was still better, but also to then show if you start to charge these things off renewable energy, it fundamentally changes what happens in this. But it's interesting, this isn't like that guy talking about all we need is some good wheels and some spoilers. The different types of things that stop people taking it up. Like they go, I don't like the look of that car or whatever. This is why, you know, scientists and engineers go, we've made you the solution. You go, yeah, it doesn't look good enough, mate. And they're the different aspects in there. But interestingly, at the time, that was the kind of issue. That's now moved on now. If you now look at online, the online debate from people who are trying to push back against EVs is to say, oh, but once you manufacture, you look at the manufacture of them and the battery and the critical minerals, as we talked about, that they are less environmentally friendly than a gas car. Now, when they're in the shop floor, in actual fact, yeah, an EV is less environmentally friendly when it leaves the shop floor. But over the lifetime of it, particularly depending on how you charge it, it becomes better overall. But that's pushed that new focus is now the question becomes, okay, well, how do we build the batteries? How do we look at the end of life of the batteries and all these things? How do we make it so that these cars actually are much more sustainable long term, even in the manufacture and that? And that is where I want to get our next guest up here. Someone who's at the forefront of looking at these issues is Associate Professor Alejandro Montoya, Director of Fuels and Resources Laboratory, Director of Environmental Engineering and part of the Net Zero Institute. Alejandro, take us on to the next part of the journey.
Thank you very much, Craig, for that nice introduction, and thank you for everyone to come and listen to us. I would like to start with a question and touching on something that Deanna just talked about mobile phones. Who has a mobile phone stuck in the drawer for a long time just collecting dust? Many of us, right? And imagine if that mobile phone is what is one of the keys that it will help us to transition to a clean energy future, right? So I am going to talk here about electronic waste and how can they be used for extracting some elements that we require for some technologies that are currently present and some technologies that are coming in the future. So when you see a mobile phone or a laptop or a Nokia, then think not as a waste, but you must start thinking as a treasure trove there where we can get some value out of it. In the case of electronic waste and extracting elements from it, the science and technology is growing very rapidly, but it doesn't stop there. We require people to be conscious in the use of electronic waste. How do we dispose the electronic waste? How do we use them until we cannot use it anymore? So it is very important that this circularity of electronic waste becomes embedded in every single person so that we can take advantage of the opportunities in there. We all live in an age where the technology is skyrocketing, and we are producing billions of electronic waste every year. We are only recycling a small part of it. And in Australia, we are recycling about 10% of the electronic waste. But there is a lot of value in those electronic waste. For instance, copper, gold, silver, nickel, many elements there that we need to dig from mines, but they are already present in a very easy form for us to extract and to use them. Electronic waste has more elements concentrated on it than they exist in mines. For instance, copper exists, the amount of copper in electronic waste is 40 times larger than in mines. Gold, silver. What you see in that picture, it's a picture from Dillon Marsh, a photographer from South Africa. And he took a picture of that mine. It's a copper mine. And he collected the amount of copper that was extracted from that mine and embedded it in that particular picture so that you can have a look of what are the requirements of mining for a particular amount of material. So if we are able to recycle some of the elements that are in electronic waste, then the mining technologies, we won't need to dig so much minerals from it. I've been talking a lot about copper, nickel, but there are a number of elements that are becoming really important in this energy transition, and these elements are globally are localized, and some elements then they have some risk for the clean energy transition. Lithium, vanadium, and copper are very, very important elements that we will need for our energy transition. Electric vehicles uses silver, carbon, and some rare elements there for improving the efficiency of magnets, and these magnets then miniaturized motors and so on. Mobile phones, Deanna was talking about a number of elements there, but it's rich in gold, silver, rare elements. This is what we are using now, but what we are going to need in the future, for instance, flow batteries. We will need to build enormous batteries that they can be allocated near power stations or solar panels so that they can store the energy there so that they can be used at night. And those batteries will be based on vanadium and zinc, for instance. Other elements like lithium, nickel, and so on, they will need to be produced massively in the coming years. There are many ways to extract these elements from electronic waste, and historically, most of the electronic waste has been treated with thermal process. So that means just heating up the electronic waste and taking out the elements and then burning the plastic and then treating the gases coming out from those plants. In order for them to be economic, they need to be built in a very, very large scale. But for instance, Australia, it's not allowed to export electronic waste anymore, and many countries are following on the same legislation. So solutions need to be localized, and in many cases they will need to be carried out in regional areas. So other methods, like biological leaching or hydro metallurgical methods, then becomes really more important, because they can be built in a small scale, and they can be then run in regional operations. So one of the big aspects that we are doing here at the university is that we are trying to produce value out of electronic waste. We are talking about motherboards from computers. We are talking about mobile phones. And they contain a number of elements there that they have important value. And we are extracting them with a hydrometallurgical process. That means that we keep the metals in solution, and then it's more environmentally friendly and so on. We are therefore spinning out several companies that hopefully they will be taking advantage of this technology to commercialize this.
Fantastic, Alejandro. Come and join us here. So in terms of that, that's fascinating. So you're looking at the liquid approach. Is that the way you're going on it?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the benefit of that? Like, you're getting computer stuff wet.
When you burn waste, let's assume that the system in which you burn the waste is like this auditorium, but the gases that are generated, they are mostly toxic, and they need to be treated. So if you want to treat those toxic gases, then you need to build a space that is probably 3 times this space, and it costs a lot. So doing it in liquid phase, then the environmental aspect becomes a lot more favorable, and you can control more waste in liquid than in gas.
And in terms of this technology, where is it in terms of being comparable? I always find it amazing that it's cheaper to kind of go into the middle of Western Australia, dig down, dig out, trying to get critical mineral that way, than reusing the minerals we've already extracted. Is it the kind of thing you'll be price competitive with mining to recycle the critical minerals?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, it's about two problems here. One is an environmental problem, because we need to solve the problem of the electronic waste. The electronic waste, on one side, they contain fire retardants, and when they are sent into landfills, they leach out elements that are very toxic and do not degrade in the atmosphere and end up in water streams. So we need to deal with that, even if it is expensive to do. And if we are not allowed to export that electronic waste to be used in other or treated in other countries, we need to deal with it now. The other part is that the waste is generating value through copper, through gold, through silver. So the technology produces a value. Then whether it is comparable with large-scale technologies that are being there for a very long time, I think there is a gap in there. The good thing is that as it is in the small scales, it is economically viable. And what it means is that making it larger, then there is a lot of prospect to be.
Is it also the case that to make it easier for you to be extracting those minerals at the end, that you kind of need the manufacturers to build phones or batteries or whatever in a way that helps the recycling at the end? Because I always hear things of the recycler people saying, you know, if this was made, instead of with a glue, it was made with a screw, we'd be able to take it apart and recycle it. But because it's made this way, because they want to save a few cents at this part, it makes it harder at the end. Or does your system kind of overcome that problem anyway?
Well, absolutely. When it comes to net zero technologies, what we usually do in Australia is that we dig minerals, we produce the ores or the concentrates, and then we sell the concentrates to be extracted somewhere else. I think with this technology, what we will be using is actually producing the product, which is copper, which is silver, which is gold, with technologies that we can control the release of carbon dioxide or release of toxic chemicals to the atmosphere. So it becomes a product that is produced through a carbon neutral technology.
Let's hope we get there quickly. Dan, I just want to ask you on this, because how does the kind of Net Zero Institute work with this kind of technology that Alejandro is looking at? You know, again, breakthrough, great work on the science front. How do we get it to that next stage?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting. I think, I'm not sure if Alejandro remembers, but probably one of the first conversations we had. So I should explain, we have a number of what we call pillars. And these pillars, in the case of our critical minerals pillar, now has over 50 people across, I think, 5 faculties of the university. And actually one of the first questions that I think when you shared some of your technology was the question, how do we make this bankable? And so that was actually the start of quite significant work with the University of Sydney's Business School. And so looking at circular business models, and these are used around the world, and there is some really good practice. And so that's something we take really seriously, the sharing of knowledge and knowledge exchange, not just within our own country, but actually across the world. And that's one of the things that we provide a platform for.
Yeah, so you're because as I said, yeah, I've seen all these fantastic things over the years doing war and waste going, great, we've got this solution. And then I look 2 or 3 years later and it's like, it still hasn't come through the system. So you got to get the business, the economic case, the legal case. There's so many of those barriers there to actually get it to the place where we can actually see it as a natural thing. Now, I'm just going to grab this clicker again. To get to our next topic, in terms of that waste question at the end of the lab, because I do war and waste, the question I get asked a great deal nowadays is, what about solar panel waste? There's a lot of people very concerned about solar panel waste. So I just wanted to very quickly talk about this. At the moment, it's not as bad. So in 2018, our solar panel waste was 6,000 tonnes of solar panel waste. But obviously, it tends to last 20 or 30 years. You know, it's long lasting. So the kind of all the stuff we're putting on now is going to be a bigger problem down the line. So by 2035, we're thinking of be about 100,000 tonnes of solar panel waste. I just want to put that in context, and I'm going to have to slightly change the graph size here. So that's still, that little one there is still the 2018 6,000, and the 2035 there is the solar in 2035. Now, for the fans of solar in this room like me, who really love solar, you're all really nervous right now, right? Because you're seeing this here, you're going, what's Craig going to show us? What's he doing? Is that solar in 2050 or whatever? So that, just for context, is coal ash waste now. Every year right now, 12.5 million tonnes of coal ash waste. So every time, and again, so this is coal ash waste, and we never really see it, despite the fact there's lots of it around. So this is up next to Lake Macquarie. This is a big pit of coal ash waste that's just sitting there by Lake Macquarie, just by there. So now, I am not saying, by the way, that we shouldn't be focusing on how we recycle. It's great, as we've said. The more we can reuse those critical minerals, reuse the glass, it reduces the carbon footprint of that product. It's a really important thing that we're doing, and there's lots of great research going on in Australia right now. But, as sometimes seems to happen online nowadays, if anyone's ever telling you, oh, we shouldn't be using those solar panels because it's going to lead to waste, in actual fact, I've slightly misled you. This figure of 12.5 million tonnes a year of coal ash waste is actually a few years old. The current figure is about 12 million tonnes. Why is it going down? It's going down because of our shift to renewables. And I actually, if only I knew a group of scientists or something could help me crunch the numbers on this, because I've been looking at this and I actually am pretty sure that solar panels, every solar panel we use is actually reducing our overall waste in Australia because of the fact that it takes away from what is one of our largest bits of waste, and that is coal ash waste. So we need to be improving this, but we need to be focusing on continuing this. And what would make solar panels even better? If we could make them more efficient. If only there was somebody who could talk to us about making solar panels even more efficient. Please welcome to the stage Professor Anita Ho-Bailey from the John Hook Chair of Nanoscience.
I love that introduction.
So, yes, all right. So let's start. Before we kind of talk about how we make solar panels more efficient, which I'm very keen to do because I've got a small roof and lots of things I want to run off the solar panels. Let's talk us through how they work to start with.
Sure. Okay, so how does solar cell work? First of all, you need the sun. Oh, hang on, I need the clicker. So I've got because I want to show you a beautiful photo of the sun. So we need the sun, and the sun ejects out energetic particles called the photons. So it's also electromagnetic radiation, aka light. And light is made up of particles at different energy. So, and you can see it in nature. So you can see that in light, there is a spectrum of different energetic particles. So for example, with UV, we have particles with an electron volt of about 3 electron volts. So what is an electron volt? It's basically a unit of energy. So 1 electron volt is around 60 million trillion times smaller than the energy you find in a grain of sugar. So it's a very, very small unit, but we get loads and loads and loads of photons shining on us every day. And as we move down the rainbow, you can see the energy of the photons reduce. So for example, with blue light, you get the energy of the photon of 3 electron or 2.6 electron volt, and then green is 2.4, orange is 2.2, and so on. So you get down to red is around 1 electron volt. Okay, so we've got the sunlight, and then the next thing you need is a semiconductor. So what is a semiconductor? So a semiconductor where there's no energy input into the material is just an insulator. So you get the electrons sitting there doing nothing. So it's immobile, so it's an insulator. But if you give the semiconductor enough energy, then the electrons will jump onto higher energy levels where they will become mobile, so it conducts electricity. So in semiconductor, you have electrons sitting at different energy levels, and in the low energy levels, it forms a valence band. Does it show that? Yes. And for electrons at high energy levels, they form a continuous band called a conduction band.
I hope you're all listening, because there'll be a test at the end.
Yeah, that's right.
You're all going to have to make a solar cell after this talk, so...
But like every cooking show, I've got one ready for you. So between the conduction band and the valence band is the band gap. So what happens is when the sunlight shines on the semiconductor, it gives it enough energy for the electrons to, for the electrons to jump up to the, to jump up to conduction band and become a conductor. Okay, so why do I go through all this band gap and electrons and valence band, conduction band? Because I need to explain all this for the game to work, and then after that, I'll explain how we increase the efficiency of the solar cell. Okay, so I'm not testing you, but I'm trying to use the game to sort of like make the knowledge really sink into the head. So I need 3 live audience participations, yes. It's not a live show without, so I've got you, and I've got, this is so hard. So there's 3 of you. Maybe you just have to talk amongst yourselves which 2 want to come down. Okay, so why don't you come down, and then you come down. And what's your name? Annabelle, welcome. Yes. And don't do anything until I tell you to do show. And what's your name? Anna?
Sean.
So Annabelle, Anna, and Sean. Okay, So follow me and come over here. Okay, so what we're trying to simulate. Oh, okay, so hang on. I think, it's like a Nerf gun 101. Okay, so solar cell 101.
I feel like we're in the danger zone over here. I thought they were going to be shooting that way.
Yeah.
What's going on here,
It's
Anita?
deliberately placed. So what we're going to do is we're going to simulate a solar cell and the band gap and the conduction band and the valence band, okay? So we've got Annabelle here. What you're going to do is your Nerf gun is going to be a photon with energy just above the band gap. So that means when you shoot your Nerf gun, you will have the dart landing just above the band gap, meaning the bottom of the conduction band. Okay, so do you want to give it the practice? And so before we do that, when she shoot, we should go, yay, okay? So on the count of 3 and only shoot once. 1, 2, 3, go. Yay! Okay, so we've got Sean. Okay, so Sean, you're going to be the photon with the energy below the band gap. Yeah? Exactly, yes. So when she shoot, we will all go, oh. Okay, so on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, shoot.
How do you shoot?
Ah, okay, hang on.
How do you shoot?
We need Nerf gun 101.
You wouldn't get that in an American school.
And then as you hold that, you press that button.
Make sure it's below the conduction band. Go. Whoa, yes!
Good job.
Oh.
Oh.
Okay, right, so we got Anna. Anna, you're going to be a photon with energy way above the band gap. Yeah? So it will be quite, so try not to overshoot, but just like on the top of the red net. Can you do that? And then we go, yay. Yeah?
Wait.
So, yeah, so not above, just right there. Because you want the
top.
solar cell to still catch that photon. Yay! Okay. Now, I'm going to test you guys. So we've got Annabelle with the photon energy just above the band gap, and Sean below the band gap, and then we've got Anna, way above the band gap. Which one is the most efficient way of using the photon energy? Okay, so I would say Sean, is it efficient way of using energy? No. How about Anna? Is it efficient way of using energy? No. And Annabelle is the most efficient way of using energy because you only need just above the band gap, right? So that's what happened in our solar cells. So for example, with the solar panels we have in the solar farm and on the roof is made of silicon. And the silicon band gap is 1.1 eV. So that means it needs photon energy just at 1.1 eV. So if you shine UV light, blue light, green light, orange light, the energy in the light still get converted to electricity, but not efficiently. So a lot of that excess energy get converted into heat. So your solar panels get really hot in the sun, and the highest efficiency you can get out of silicon solar panels is 30%. Okay, so what do we do in our lab? What we do is we're going to stack the material on top of each other. So we have the silicon with a band gap of 1 eV, and we stack another material on top that is maybe 1.5 eV, and then stack another material on top that is 2 eV, so that when you have the sun shining the light on, you will convert all of the photon energy efficiently. So what we'll do is we come over here, and we have a triple junction tandem solar cell. Okay, so you'll be happy because this time your photon will be captured by the solar cell. Yes, so you will aim for the red.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you'll aim for the green, and then you'll aim for the blue. Because you're a high energy photon, you're a mid energy photon, and you're a low energy photon, yeah? Okay, so on the count of 3, I think you got lots of darts in there. So you just go wild. You should hate in there. Okay, so you aim for red, you aim for green, you aim for blue, yeah? So on the count of 3, just keep shooting.
All together.
Yeah. So you go for red, you go for green, you go for blue. Yeah. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, shoot! Go, go, go!
Yes, well done.
Yay! Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So you can hand the gun back.
Nerf guns back, or do we get to keep it?
Yeah, we got to keep it for the next event.
No.
Okay,
That's the whole Net Zero Institute's budget in those guns.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, so what happens is silicon solar cell, the highest efficiency you can ever get is 30%. Double junction solar cell, the highest efficiency you can get is 45%. And then triple junction is around 51%. So in our lab, that's what we do. And people may ask, well, if you keep adding layers, what happens? We get to around 60%. And why we don't go beyond? Well, that's another lecture on physics, semiconductor physics. Okay, so I'll show you what we do in our lab. And what we do in our lab is we make use of this material called metal halide perovskites. And of course, in reality, it's a lot smaller. So you have the metal, and then the halide, and then the organic cation. So they arrange in a crystal structure like this. And what makes this amazing is it's got very good photo absorption, so we can make it really thin. So the thickness of the layer that is required for solar cell is around 1 micron. So a piece of hair is around 100 microns, so you can see how thin it is. And for the silicon technology, we're using 100 microns as well. So you can see the layer is really thin. And what we do is we coat it onto the conventional silicon solar cell to increase the efficiency. So you can see that it should... Okay, so it should turn... Ooh. Okay. So probably the torch battery is not really, it's not charged enough to turn.
And you
the
see
fan.
those big wind turbines as you drive down to Canberra. Anita also pushes those around at night.
Ooh. Anyway, this is embarrassing, isn't it?
Is the other? Is it connected on both bits? Yeah. All right.
Okay, anyhow. So trust me, it works. So, so the most efficient silicon cell at the moment is around 27%, and in our lab we are pumping out solar cells that's around 30%. So the idea is to increase the efficiency of the panels without increasing the amount of mass used, and therefore we can also reduce the amount of land area being used for solar panels. So this is what we do in our lab.
It's fantastic. It's really exciting, and particularly, I mean, I think, particularly the other day, as I said, a small roof. I was trying to charge an electric car, run the house in that. The idea of more efficient. So this kind of increase. If you go from a 27% to a 51%, like you're nearly doubling the amount of power you're getting out of the same space?
Yes, that's right. That's the idea.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
And what stage are we at with this technology? Because I'm excited.
Yes, so we're doing very well because the material is amazing. And the stage is we definitely got the demonstration working. People are looking at scale up. So there are startups in the world, and I think last time I counted, there are around 30 companies, startup and established companies looking at this technology, and around 49 institutions that are working in exactly the same thing as us. But we are one of the 8 in the world that got 30% certified. So certified meaning someone certified that, yes, when you claim you're making 30% efficient cell, you're really making them. So, yeah.
So then are you working with companies now looking to build this? Are you working with companies in Australia or predominantly overseas, or where are we doing it?
Yeah, so we're working with an Australian startup. They focus is on silicon technology, and they give us the silicon cell and we stack the perovskites on top. So we look at manufacturability. We also look at the stability of the materials because they don't like oxygen, they don't like water, which is abundant on Earth. And so in our lab, we develop knowledge on how they degrade, and by knowing how they degrade, we can stop them from degrading. So we were able to get the cells to pass 3 industry standard tests. Of course, there are many other industry standard tests that we need to pass. So we're working on it.
How much more? Does it use a lot more material? Is it thicker or larger, or is it, you know, fairly similar? Is it going to look the same?
Yeah, so it looks exactly the same. It's going to be 1 micron thicker than the already 100 micron thick solar cell. So it's adding 1% extra thickness to the cell, and all the rest we want to make it as similar as possible as the current product. So we coat the layer on top and have exactly the same electrical contact.
Yeah, wow. So, and does it use more rare minerals or anything else, or is it fairly similar overall in terms of what it uses?
So it uses the metal, it uses halide, and you also use organic materials. So that's the extra material that we use. So in our lab, we pump out around 10,000 solar cells a year, and we only buy very small bottles that will last us around 3 to 6 months. So 4 bottles will last us 10,000 solar cells.
Wow. So when do you think we might see this on the market? Like, are we years off, or is this around the corner? Or?
So there are demonstration plants already in China, already on the roof and also in the field, and they're collecting the outdoor data to see the lifetime of the modules, because at the moment silicon modules last quite long. So the product warranty is around 15 years and the performance warranty is around 25 years. So they're looking at the outdoor data. So for us, we don't have 25 years to sit around. What we do in our lab is we put them into environmental chambers and do accelerating testing. So we thermal cycle them, or we just...
So you're having to prove that it will last long enough. That's the kind of
Exactly.
That's the kind of barrier at the moment.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of this, how does when the Net Zero Institute come into this in terms of the other problems of getting to the next step?
I have to just first tell everybody, because this is very exciting, Anita's solar cells are in space. So just to link this to the previous session with the incredible astronaut. But look, I guess that's one part of it, of gaining the renewable energy and doing so more efficiently and effectively. The other side of this is, what do you then do with that renewable energy? And really what we're doing at the Institute is connecting all of the pieces. It's like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle that we're trying to put together. And so the question is, do you store it? So I think we all know that batteries are an incredible storage technology, but there's also improvements that need to be made. There are significant challenges, critical minerals challenges for batteries as well, and you've probably all heard a lot in the media recently about battery fires and so forth. So there's a lot of improvements needed in battery technologies. There's also some really cool technologies where we can harness excess renewable energy. So you've probably heard that at times in Australia we actually have too much renewable energy. And so what do we do with that? And actually one of the things that's being talked about quite a lot is using that excess energy and using it to split water to make hydrogen. And so you've probably all heard a lot of interest in the use of hydrogen. The reason is that when it burns, it makes water again. So it's a clean effluent, if you like. And so once we've got the hydrogen, we can actually use that to do a lot of different stuff. So we can use it to power devices. We can use it to make what they call green chemicals. So rather than carbon-based chemicals, we can use the hydrogen to make chemicals that power, for fuels, for example. So we can connect these technologies together. They don't exist on their own. Really, the magic and what's special, well, it's not magic at all, it's science, but the magic is when you actually implement and the end user receives the product.
Just on the hydrogen front, because I feel like, I must admit personally, I keep going from being really excited by green hydrogen to being kind of reading things and being like, oh, this is more problematic. And I think previously the kind of model was, like Australia will create this hydrogen, we'll ship it to Japan to run Japan's system. Now it seems to be like, oh, the travel's really hard, so it might be that we use hydrogen, for instance, in Western Australia, where we dig up the ores, an iron ore, and we actually do the first part of the process there. So the hydrogen is used to kind of create green metal, and it's we don't then have to travel the hydrogen. Is that one of the issues you're looking at in the institute? Is that kind of how do we use hydrogen properly, and does it have to travel, or do we do it at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So all the way from producing hydrogen, which is using, for example, renewable energies to split water to make hydrogen, all the way to how do we transport that hydrogen. So one of the challenges is that hydrogen causes embrittlement in pipelines, so you actually can't pass it through the existing infrastructure that we have in Australia. And so one of the things that we're working on is how you can actually convert the hydrogen into carriers. And so you can carry hydrogen with other types of chemicals like ammonia or even with natural gas. And in those cases, because they're liquids, we may be able to actually transport the hydrogen and then crack it apart at the other end. And that's actually one of the big areas that's being discussed for Australia in terms of bunker ships that actually take liquid ammonia, for example, over to Japan, and they do the cracking in Japan.
Yeah, Alejandro, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I may add a little bit on the hydrogen part. The hydrogen is generated in an equipment that is called electrolyzer, and it has two components. One component produces hydrogen, which is valuable, and the other one produces oxygen, which is very cheap. The hydrogen that is the valuable is not that valuable. It's relatively cheap because we produce it at massive scale. So one of the things that the technology that I am developing in the lab is to use the oxygen compartment of the electrolyzer to actually do the job of extracting metals from electronic waste, and at the same time produces hydrogen. So in that case, the metals that are being recovered are the valuable product, and the hydrogen is an add-on that it can be used in case the company would like to do that. So
wow.
We approach IGO in Western Australia to look at that opportunity, and they are very interested in that. And coming back to the amount of energy, we said to them, the technology is energy intensive. What they say to us is, don't worry about energy. We have plenty, and we usually waste it. So if your technology all actually requires energy, it would be better for us because we will make use of the waste energy.
I also wanted to ask you, Alejandro, just we're talking about the batteries there. Are you also looking at recycling of batteries? Because I know that's the other question I get asked a lot about is what about the end life for EVs and batteries on our houses and that? Where are we in terms of battery recycling?
In Australia, I think in terms of recycling, we do well, but what we do with that product is another story. So how do we give value to the item that is being recycled? I think all of us know about what happened to the plastics that were recycled by Woolworths, that we recycled the plastic, we put it in a shed, and we didn't know what to do with it, and in the end, we had to burn it, right? So in terms of batteries recycling, I think Australia is doing very well in terms of recycling. There is now new legislations that requires the states to recycle. I think what we need to improve is what do we do with those items that is being recycled?
So is there the technology there that can use the battery afterwards?
Absolutely,
yeah.
yes.
So again, the technology is there. It's about those next steps of creating a market, creating the infrastructure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we did burn the plastic, just so you know. I think a lot of that's still sitting in warehouses actually at the moment. We're trying to find some solutions for that, absolutely. I also want to ask is, it's interesting because in a weird way, what Anita's doing was, we talked about that as a kind of way of being a positive for hydrogen. But again, I've seen this interesting debate that it's like, hydrogen used to be talked about as being the kind of would have hydrogen cars. And then it seemed to be, oh, well, electric vehicles are a much more efficient way because, kind of, in terms of how much electricity you have from the sun or wherever, a large proportion of that ends up in the car, ends up driving, whereas with hydrogen, you lose a lot of that energy. And then it was like, well, okay, we'll use it for trucks. But then even that seems to be, it's not going to be the case. And then we say, well, we'll use it for boats and that. it seems like the kind of efficiency of just using electricity directly seems to be pushing hydrogen into lots of different areas. What do you think we'll end up using hydrogen for? Green hydrogen. Who wants to deal with that question?
I mean, maybe I can add a few thoughts, and I'm going to pass across to Anita. But hydrogen is, at an atomic level, is an extremely important component of many of our fuels. So if we can use green hydrogen produced from renewable sources rather than using fossil hydrogen, which is usually called, that there's all this colour spectrum for hydrogen. You might have heard of brown hydrogen and turquoise hydrogen and blue hydrogen and so forth and so on. But if
it's all part of greenwashing.
I'm not here to do that, Craig.
I know, I'm just saying.
If we can replace brown hydrogen with green hydrogen, then that's better, obviously.
Fundamentally. And don't you already just, you're going to go to Anita, actually, yeah.
I wasn't quite sure about the question.
No. Well, I guess I was just saying that, but by making solar cells far more efficient, you're actually, again, making it more likely we go down that full electrification route rather than kind of going down a hydrogen route, potentially.
Okay. So I guess the idea is, some of the ideas is Australia's a big piece of land, and therefore we get a lot of solar particles hitting the area, right? And then you have areas like Japan and Korea, they're sort of real stage poor. So the idea is we can put all the solar panels in our country, and then we get the electricity converted to hydrogen. So in a sense, we're bottling the solar energy in the form of hydrogen.
So it's the export of it.
And then ship it up
to
Japan and Korea.
So it's just like exporting, because at the moment we export our energy. Australia's a net energy exporter. We export it in the form of coal. I mean, Mike Cannon-Brookes is going to try and do it through a giant cable under the ground to Singapore. But hydrogen's another way we go. We can send our solar energy overseas to do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
In terms of hydrogen, I think Australia has a big opportunity because we are an important producer of ammonia. We have several companies here in Australia producing ammonia, and ammonia requires hydrogen. So that's a big opportunity that we have. Yeah,
and ammonia is huge. I mean, I don't use it much in my life, I don't think, but it's a huge the amount of ammonia that's actually created. Just on the hydrogen though, Deanna, is it right? You've already through the institute, you've actually made a hydrogen-powered drone.
Yeah, so we've got actually one of our aeronautical engineers who has been able to develop a type of a fuel cell that actually operates off hydrogen as the energy source. So what they're doing here is an incredible project in regional Queensland where they're actually using these drones to deliver medicines into regional and outback Queensland, because at the moment they're either doing that on long-haul trucks, which are obviously working off fossil fuel, or they're actually flying light planes out. So this has been a really critical project, I think, and they're hoping that it might actually roll out over more of regional Australia.
Amazing. And one lucky person here, we're going to use the hydrogen drone to spy on you on your way home. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But it's great to see this, even that little kind of, it must be fun to have those little experiments going on where you see solutions and you see this is going to become the big solution in the future. It is fantastic. Well, I hope you, like me, have been excited by all of this science and also excited by the idea that, the Net Zero Institute is trying to take the other parts of the university to work together and make these incredible scientific and engineering breakthroughs become more of a reality quicker, because it's been, I must admit, over the years of doing the War on Waste and climate documentaries, it's the constant thing that frustrates the hell out of me, is just seeing these incredible breakthroughs that we have from scientists in Australia and engineers in Australia, and then just not seeing them come to market, and we need to get them to market so much quicker to have that kind of breakthrough. So thank you so much, guys. Please thank Deanna, Alejandro and Anita for a lovely conversation. And also to Anna, Sean and Annabelle as well for our wonderful shooting and for amazingly not shooting us throughout that. That was definitely against occupational health and safety here at Sydney University, so no one's allowed to tell anyone about it. But thank you so much for it. And we actually let's quickly, I think we got a couple of minutes. Let's get a couple of questions from the audience, I think. Quickly, let's get some questions. Yes, madam.
Yep. Yep. Ah, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a good question. So when you put an additional solar cell on top of another solar cell, so you know how with batteries you've got a positive charge and a negative charge? So when you put the semiconductor material on top, you also need a negative layer and a positive layer. So you're adding 3 layers, although they're really, really thin. They're 1 nanometer. So it's like 1,000 times smaller than 1 micron already. And then sometimes you also need to add an extra layer, just like a sandwiching layer interfacing the 2 cells. So you add around 4 to 5 layers extra for each additional solar cell. So if you do 3 junctions, that means you're adding, and if the bottom you also make that perovskite layer yourself, perovskite, that means you make 15 layers. So I have researchers in my lab staying up until 11 p.m. if he is going to make all 3 layers by himself. So that's the tricky part. And imagine if you're in a manufacturing line and that layer is not quite perfect, there may be pinholes, you may have non-uniformity. So I guess the challenge of realizing that is the sort of the reliability of the manufacturing.
But did you also say you have got up to 50% in some tests in the lab? What's the highest you got to in terms
in
of...
our lab is 30%.
Okay.
And I must say too, in space, so the multi-junction or this multi-layer concept is not new and they use for space, but the material they use is very expensive, so it's based on gallium arsenide, and it's around $10,000 per square meter.
Wow.
Whereas the panel you've got on your roof is around $30 per square meter in terms of manufacturing cost. So what we're trying to do is we try to breach that gap and maybe offer a more lower cost solution for the space solar cells. So if you look up to the sky, you can't. There are 2 of our solar cells in space, sort of, orbiting around the Earth on low Earth orbit. So we're trying to test those solar cells in space and see if we can offer that solution in the aerospace market.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Now the question... Yes, madam.
I'm just wondering, has anybody ever looked into tidal energy? I mean, they have.
Has anyone ever looked into tidal energy?
Why hasn't tidal energy been something? It's an incredibly powerful resource, I'd imagine.
Yes, it is, and there's definitely some, not here at the university, but there are definitely some big groups around the world looking at it. One of the challenges with tidal energy, as far as I understand it, is actually the challenge of how do you transmit that energy and actually get it back to land. It's a not too dissimilar challenge for offshore wind as well. So there are these massive cables that they have for offshore wind, but for tidal it's actually even more challenging than for offshore wind.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen when I've looked into this, a lot of the early examples of tidal stuff, firstly, it's really powerful, and also it's in salt water. So they would have systems that could capture the energy but then corrode within a short period of time or break because of the extreme pressure. There's then, I think, some Scottish companies that have done ones that kind of float on top of their water. But again, it's just the harnessing of it. They're struggling with it. And it comes down to a cost thing. It's not you can't get the energy, but you go, well, I'm going to have to pay way more and constantly have to change this and fix it, whereas a solar panel and a wind turbine is bloody cheap. So that's, yeah.
So just talking about that cheapness, so we know that to put a wind turbine up, there's a huge expense in the amount of concrete, the amount of whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And no doubt there have to be parts that have to be replaced. How does that offset against the amount of energy that one produces?
My understanding is that if you look at a life cycle analysis of that, within about 6 months, you are carbon neutral, carbon positive within about 6 months in terms of that. So, you all of these things, whenever I do any one of these things, you got to look at the life cycle analysis. Yeah. So you look at the overall thing. So it's after 6 months, it's well and truly paid back the environmental costs of making it.
Because I think that's the biggest problem that this organisation and people thinking about net zero have, is to convince the ordinary man that the value and the energy put into it is not more than what you get
Yes,
out.
and it's
Once you do that, then you have everybody on board. But
yeah,
you know,
and there's a
that's
lot
what
of
you need.
there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about that kind of stuff, because there's also a lot of very powerful groups
Lobby
who
groups,
it's in their interest to kind of misinform the
So
community
I just
about
think
it.
it's really important to sort of to get the mindset right for the rest.
Absolutely. Question down here at the front. Here, we've got a quick. Oh, yep, this lady.
It's a very low-tech question, so I apologise. I would like to recycle the technology that I have in the cupboard at home, but I don't know how to make it safe for me in terms of taking away the data. So that's why I just keep keeping it to thinking, oh, one day I'll have to find out how to do that. If you just say, go Google it at home, I'll do that.
No, well, look, we have looked into that, and that's one of the major reasons that people aren't recycling that stuff. And so Mobile Muster, which is the kind of one where you can go to any shop and get a little packet and you can send it to Mobile Muster. The way they basically do it is they destroy the phone and it's taken into pieces. They make it in a way that you cannot get the data off it. The data cannot be taken. That's what they kind of guarantee. So that's the Australian system in terms of recycling your phones.
And it's still usable for all the products
Yeah,
inside.
it's
Okay,
usable.
thank you very much.
It's called urban mining, yes.
Great
question over here, sir.
Mine's even a lower level than these other
That's
questions.
better, great.
I mean, the lady up there talked about the ordinary person, and I think as a lawyer you'll understand the reasonable person, ordinary person test. As far as technology and science, fantastic, and it certainly gives me hope from what you lovely people have told me. I think it's even more fundamental in that we've got to change people's attitude, their mentality. Because, I see recycling bins and there's bottles in there that are half full of water. Empty the bloody water on the grass, for God's sake. And also, something like the return and earn scheme, where they've put a value on what we would traditionally call waste, well, I believe it's been very successful. So I know it's at a lower level, but I think that's the level we've got to really, it's about changing human behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it's interesting, like when Deanna talked about trying to find a way to make Alejandro's method worked, the return on earn is actually a great example of it. Put a 10-cent value on it, it's massively increased recycling levels.
Well, I can tell you,
People
believe it
pick
or
up.
not, I've made $120,000 from the return and earn scheme. I work as a psychologist. My doctor told me about 5 years ago, Tom, your job is killing you. It's too sedentary. So I got off my backside. I collect.
$120,000?
$120,000.
Oh, gee whiz! I always wondered how much those were, right? But again,
I picked them up from.
But again, that's
to
the
here.
thing that's the thing of putting a value in it. We need to make all of this stuff have a value. All of this stuff, it constantly drives me nuts. It's that so often in Australia, the cheapest option is often the least environmentally sustainable option. That's where we need to be lobbying government to change the thing. That's why we need lawyers and economists involved in all this kind of stuff, which is why this is such a central approach. Yeah.
Policy.
Right up the back, sir.
Thanks, Craig. We were talking about changing mindsets and human behaviour. One of the things Sydney-siders will remember only this week, we were told there's a couple of power, turbines out for regular maintenance and 2 broke down, and there was a bit of stress in the system. And a lot of news reports and so forth said, people are being asked to keep their energy use down. There was no talk of telling people, use as much electricity as you can between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. because it's a sunny day and we've got oodles of it. So crank up your air conditioner. I put mine at 19 degrees during that time because I've got solar panels, and I just have them all belting out cold air. 3 o'clock I turn them all off. And the house stays fairly cool until 10 o'clock at night. So that's never said. So if you know anyone here that might have a morning breakfast show on radio or something, maybe they could promote that.
I do that sort of stuff, yeah, definitely. But it's also, this is it. I mean, do you work with kind of, for instance, the psychology department here, and then also the marketing people as well? Is that the kind of thing you're working with?
Yeah, we do. And actually another really interesting area is behavioural finance. And we have a colleague who who is part psychology, part business, but actually showing how important mindset is. And actually this can even make countries make better decisions. So reciprocity between countries, so goodwill between countries, can actually have a huge impact on shifting the net zero transition.
Okay, final question from the audience. This young man here.
My question is, what do you think are some of the best or most effective strategies, especially for children, to reduce carbon emissions on a daily basis?
Okay, I can't help it. I'm married to an architect who advocate thermally, thermally well-designed houses and structures. So I think we talked about lawyers and social scientists, and I guess it's a holistic approach to reducing our energy use. A lot of the houses and all buildings in Australia are not very well built. It's cold in winter and it's very, very hot in summer. Like the gentleman up there, if you can just switch on the aircon when it's hot, and then when the sun sets, you just switch off the aircon, it will stay cool the rest of the night. So I guess for young people, equip yourself with whatever discipline you have, and then have that attitude about, what can I do to help the planet, and all that knowledge that you've gained today, you can just use it today. You can go home and reduce the waste.
And now, given that most kids can't even afford to buy a house in Australia, let alone design it thermally efficiently, I will also say, I guess, look, the pester power of kids is quite amazing. So in the home, it's pestering parents to be, why don't we have solar cells? It's pestering people at your school. It's talking to your principals and saying, hey, schools are a classic example. We use all of our energy during the day. That's when we're there. We should have solar cells on there. It's raising money through the school to try and do that kind of stuff. And then also it's the power of kids in actually campaigning and putting look, in the end, we can do a lot ourselves to do things and reduce our carbon footprint. But as a kid yourself, your power long-term is going to be campaigning and voting and changing the perspective in the community. And that's going to be where your power comes from as well. Cool, thank you everyone. Great to have you all here. Great questions. We've gone a bit over time, but it was such a great session we needed to. Thank you again to all of our panel. Thanks to a great audience. Thanks for coming along today.